Hey everyone, I'm Adam Haritan from Learn Your Land. I'm hanging out here in the woods in western Pennsylvania on this beautiful autumn day. And I really enjoy this time of year because from a forager's perspective, there's a whole lot to harvest, both from the plant and the fungal kingdom. And I think we're all familiar with that old adage, you sow in the spring, reap in the fall. And it doesn't just apply to gardening, it doesn't just apply to farming, but it also applies to nature and what nature has to offer. And we literally just have to show up at the right time, at the right place. And as long as we give thanks, we can harvest an incredible bounty. Now in this video, what I'd like to do is discuss a particular species, one plant whose fruits are very abundant this time of year. And it's a plant that I really enjoy connecting with every autumn. And this plant is none other than the eponymous autumn olive. So a little backstory on autumn olive. This is one of the most invasive plants here in the eastern half of the United States. It's native to Asia. It was brought over here in the 1830s and then promoted throughout the 1900s by the U.S. Soil Conservation Service to help control erosion, to provide food and cover for wildlife, and as a windbreak. However, it quickly spread in the ecosystems where it was planted, and now it is considered one of the most aggressive and persistent weeds that we have here in the United States. Still, there might be more to the story than it just being a nuisance in its ecosystem. It might be doing some beneficial things, and we're going to discuss that in a little bit. But first, let's go over the description for this plant. Autumn olive is a plant in the Elaeagnaceae family, or the Oleaster family. Here in Pennsylvania, there are a couple species. This one is Elaeagnus umbellata. Now this plant typically inhabits woodland borders, old farms, and the areas along trails, so it likes a somewhat disturbed environment. Autumn olive is a deciduous shrub, and it's not actually related to olives. It's in a completely different family. But it's a deciduous shrub that loses its leaves every year, and it's not entirely herbaceous, so it has some woody tissue, but it's not as large as a tree either. And I typically find it to be about 10 feet tall. That's the average specimen that I find walking around these trails. Now the leaves of this plant are unique. So the leaves are entire, meaning there are no teeth to them, and they're somewhat wavy in appearance. The top is a green color, but on the bottom, there's a key identifying characteristic. The bottom of these leaves have a silvery sheen to it. And it's not just pure silver. If you look up close, you'll see that there are scales. So they're silver scales that from a distance give it this overall silvery sheen. This plant flowers from May to early June, and the flowers are a pale yellow to a creamish color. And there are 4 sepals to each flower, so they're not true petals, but they're known as sepals. And then these will give rise to the fruits, and the fruits will ripen late August into September into October. So right now it's the end of September, so this is a pretty good time to harvest these fruits. At first these fruits might be orangish in color, then they'll turn to a red. And when you look up close, you'll see that these fruits have little tiny silver scales to them. If you don't see that, it might not be the autumn olive plant. Almost all of these fruits have those silvery scales. These fruits are botanically known as drupes, and other drupes that you might be familiar with would be cherries and plums. So they're stone fruits. There's a single seed inside of these fruits. And they're about the size of a BB, but they're longer than they are wide. Now this plant may have a few lookalikes. However, if you go through all those characteristics that we discussed, you should have no trouble discerning between the autumn olive and any of its lookalikes. Perhaps the biggest lookalike would be one that this plant is related to anyway, and that's the Russian olive. Elaeagnus angustifolia. It's in the same genus, and that one is edible anyway. However, its leaves are a little longer, and the fruits are more yellow than the one found in autumn olive. Other lookalikes might be honeysuckles. However, honeysuckles have opposite branching, and so it kind of looks like a cross where the branches are directly opposite one another. In autumn olive, the branching and the leaf arrangement is alternate, so it's left, right, all the way through the entire plant. So opposite in honeysuckle, alternate in the autumn olive. So autumn olive is one of my favorite fruits to harvest this time of year. And I start looking in August, September, even into October. And you want to time it well because you don't want to grab it too early. Let's say it starts ripening in late August. If you grab it too early, it's going to be somewhat astringent. There are tannic acids and other astringent compounds that whenever you taste it, it's going to give you that mouth puckery feeling. But if you wait a little bit, those levels will be decreased. And so if you wait into maybe mid to late September into October, it's going to taste a lot sweeter and not as astringent. However, if you wait that long, the songbirds and other wildlife might beat you to it. So my preferred weeks of harvesting would be late September into early October, but you might even still find some into November. Now what can you do with these? Well, I like to just eat them fresh. I throw them in porridge, and I also freeze them as well. So whenever I tend to make smoothies or blended drinks, I tend to add autumn olives into that, mix that with June berries and maybe some other wild berries that I've harvested throughout the year. People also make fruit leathers out of it. You can also make jams and jellies and do all kinds of things. Whatever you would do with fruits, you could typically do with autumn olive, but I just tend to eat them fresh or add them into smoothies after they've already been frozen. And you don't have to necessarily remove the seeds, because the seeds do contain important nutrients. So if you remove those seeds, you might be removing important nutrients, but if you don't want to eat the seeds, by all means, you can spit those out as well. It's all really up to you. Regardless, it's just important that you go out there and get this into your body some way. So beyond edibility, this plant is medicinal as well, and perhaps the most well talked about compound in this plant would be lycopene. And perhaps you're familiar with lycopene. You know, they talk about tomatoes and lycopene, maybe guava and watermelon as sources of lycopene. Well, lycopene is found in levels 17 times higher in the autumn olive compared to tomatoes. At least that's what the research shows. It can be up to 17 times higher. And lycopene is a non-provitamin A carotenoid, so it can't be converted to vitamin A like other carotenoids like beta-carotene, but it's still an important phytonutrient. There's a lot of research on it, especially in regards to prostate health and prostate cancer, and also breast cancer and lung cancer. And studies show that, you know, the more lycopene in the diet, the healthier that the population tends to be. So by consuming autumn olive, we're getting a lot of that lycopene into our bodies. In addition to lycopene, this plant has other important phytonutrients and compounds like alpha-cryptozanthin and beta-cryptozanthin. And in regards to beta-cryptozanthin, this is actually a carotenoid pigment that does contain provitamin A activity, so it can be converted into provitamin A. And a study from 2001 put up by the American Society for Horticultural Science found that the beta-cryptozanthin levels in autumn olive are 10 times higher than the levels found in oranges and tangerines. And other studies have found that beta-cryptozanthin has anti-cancerous properties against lung cancer. Another study from 2007 found that leaf extracts, so ethanol extracts and aqueous extracts from the leaves of autumn olive possess powerful antibacterial properties, especially against E. coli and Staphylococcus aureus. So beyond edibility, this is an incredible medicinal plant, and if this is growing where you live, I encourage you to get out there and find unique ways to get this into your body any way that you can. Before we wrap up, I just want to say something really briefly about the invasive nature of this plant. You know, a lot of people really don't like autumn olive. They don't like what it's doing to the land and its ability to crowd out a lot of native plants. However, if we look at what's really going on, we see that this plant is actually performing an essential role in this particular ecosystem by hooking up with various species of nitrogen-fixing bacteria, namely from the Frankia genus, and that's a nitrogen-fixing bacteria genus in the soil. So they work symbiotically with each other, and the bacteria is able to essentially utilize the nitrogen in the atmosphere, which is triple bonded into dinitrogen gas, and convert that into ammonium. And then the plants can essentially utilize the nitrogen from that ammonium to carry out its biological and physiological processes. And then once this plant dies back, it recycles some of that nitrogen back into the soil. And we see that this plant thrives in disturbed areas and is able to essentially put nitrogen back into the soil with the help of these Frankia nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And it's kind of like what's going on with legumes, but they work with another genus of bacteria known as rhizobia, but they're nitrogen fixers. And it's not unlike what's going on with mushrooms and various species of plants and trees. They work mycorrhizally with each other to shuttle nutrients in the soil. So whenever you see autumn olive, don't just think bad. Think, okay, it might be performing an essential role in this ecosystem. And above all else, just eat some of it, because I think most of your sentiments will change when you taste how delicious this fruit really is. Thank you so much for watching this video. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions about autumn olive, feel free to leave a comment down below or head on over to learnyourland.com so that we can connect that way. Also, if you're on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so we can stay up to date. Thanks again for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one.